Hello everyone and welcome back to the final presentation that we've got for Pineapple Support's Healing Through Kink. This presentation is going to be hosted by kink.com and presented by Mikey Mod, but it also has a panelist of our lovely Angie Gunn, who's just popped up, Dillon Diaz, Casey Calvert, Dr. Liz Powell, Domino Presley, Sebastian Keys, Fivestar. So guys, if you'd all like to put your cameras on and press go on your mics, welcome to the foray. Yeah. Hey guys, hey everyone, how are we doing?
Good, how are you?
Yeah, great.
Good, all
great.
right.
I'm a bit tired because it's the end of the 3-day event and I'm in the UK, so it's quite late now. So I apologize, I'm not fully on my game, but I'm going to hand you guys over and to let you get started. Nikki, I shall host over to you for you to take charge. Much love, and I'll speak to you all soon.
Hey, Kelly,
Thank you so much.
I can hear you, Angie. Can you?
My video isn't starting. It says I need the host to start it for me.
Oh, hang on. I'll get Leo to do that.
Sorry about that. Thank you.
No, that's okay. Don't you worry.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for coming. This is the final day, Healing Through Kink. This is the Nuances of Boundaries panel. I'm excited. Most of these people on this panel I've either met in person, I've talked via email, have seen them speak. This is a really great panel, and I'm really excited to kind of get a little deeper into the conversation about boundaries, about consent. You know, I just want to invite everybody, in the audience, on the panel, let's just all just kind of take like a big deep breath and just kind of get on the same page. So let's breathe in, let's breathe out. It is stressful times that we are living in, and I'm glad to be able to see smiles on all of your faces. And while I want to just jump right in, and the first question that I have, I'm going to actually have each person introduce themselves. So kind of state your name, talk a little bit about like who you are in the world that brings you to this panel, and then we'll just go down the line. On my left for my screen, I have the wonderful and amazing Domino Presley. So I'm gonna have you kind of go first.
Hi, can you hear me? Okay, fabulous. Hi, I'm Domino Presley, and I am a porn star and Asian and all the other stuff. And here I am.
Angie Gunn.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, everyone. Thank you. I'm a certified sex therapist, run a practice that we treat primarily sex workers, and I also do sex work, just now doing it more openly on the BL. And I'm really grateful to be here with all of you today.
Thank you, Angie. Dr. Liz Powell, I have next on my screen.
Hello, everybody. I am a psychologist, author, and coach specializing in work with folks who are queer, trans and non-binary, kinky, non-monogamous. I wrote the book Building Open Relationships, which is all about how to actually do that non-monogamy thing. And I guess I've technically been in porn because I went to a couple upper floor parties. So technically done it.
I think you're muted, Mickey. There we go.
Oh, yep. Up next, I have Casey Calvert.
Hi, I am Casey Calvert. I am an adult performer and director.
Fivestar.
Hi, my name is Fivestar. I'm a director and producer for Kink.com and also some of my personal projects, and I'm kinky in my personal life.
The amazingly talented, I keep forgetting to unmute myself, but the amazingly talented Dillon Diaz.
Hey everybody, I am Dillon Diaz. I'm an adult entertainer. I've been in the business for about 4 years now. I consider myself learning. I did my first kink on camera on set, and I've just been learning about the process, enjoying it. throughout.
And last but certainly not least, Sebastian Keys.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sebastian Keys. I'm a director and producer for Kink.com.
I thought a lot about these questions, and I have been on other panels, and I've seen other panels on the topic of consent and negotiating boundaries. And one thing that I want to just kind of say is that, like, all of us we're all still learning, we're all still growing, we're all still kind of building on mistakes that maybe we've made in the past. And I want to just kind of jump in and well, I know it's really easy to kind of talk about, like, here are the good guidelines, here are the things that you know we should be doing. I kind of want to start off by talking about what we've learned through our own struggles and our own journey. So I wanted to invite people, if they feel comfortable, to kind of talk about a time where you feel as though maybe even unintentionally or through some knowledge that now you have that you didn't have before, that you have kind of come up against somebody's boundaries, and consent wasn't so clear, or consent had to be further clarified in order for an experience to be better, or to take learnings into a new set of experiences. And I'll leave the floor kind of open for whoever wants to kind of jump in on it.
Well, I can start. I've had a lot of models in the past where we always go through with Kink.com. Our production routine is we have checklists that we go over before the shoot. And I've had a number of times where somebody might have checked on their checklist that they want to do something, and mid-scene come to find out it's not what they anticipated, or we tried it out, it's a lot more intense than what they were planning. And so we've had to readjust things. So even if somebody says, like, yeah, that's fine, it's okay, it's like anytime during the production, anytime, like, somebody's boundaries can change, and we need to adhere to that.
Cool. That's a good point. Thank you very much, Sebastian.
Can maybe speak from just a kinky person's perspective, as I'm not a video performer. But when I was learning my kink journey and also doing therapy, I was trying to figure out how to, like, you know, be a human being in my own expression. And I came from, like, you know, party girl 20s phase, and coming into, like, kink spaces, I didn't know that alcohol was a no-go. So I got real drunk before a kink party one time, and I showed up and, like, ran down the dungeon, in this, like, large dungeon, and, like, tackled my friend and did this, like, whole wrestling scene without any kind of conversation. It was one of those moments where you're like, in hindsight, this is a terrible idea. But in the moment, I was just, like, in this, like, energy and this, like, movement with, like, pleasure and connection, and not sure of how to be in both my kink identity as well as, like, now aligning with, you know, community and belonging, and being a, like, professional in those spaces too. So I'm learning a lot about boundaries over the last, this was maybe 10 years ago. So I'm much better now at both substance use as well as kink and boundaries.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up alcohol use, because that was the thing that came to mind just from my experiences. Is like, I felt like if everything was fine, you know, so, but there's no way to know for sure, you know, in past experiences. And so definitely just kind of reflecting, and actually, thanks to the Me Too movement, actually, like, just thinking about, wow, I actually don't remember having a conversation about it before anything happened, and hoping that, you know, the person was in a good space to be able to communicate with me if they didn't want to do that, but I'm not sure. And so alcohol, any kind of substance abuse, and also the ability to communicate. Like, I once had a scene with someone who was deaf, and so I wonder, did I communicate things appropriately? We're using, like, text messages. So it's like, I hope it was okay, you know, but just the ability to communicate and be sober and of sound judgment.
I think for me, one of the biggest things that I've learned over the years is about, like, the messiness of consent versus assent, that, like, a lot of times people are saying yeses because they don't feel empowered to say anything but yes, or to ask for something different, or to say no. and how like murky and muddy that can get, especially when you're in like the heat of the moment, that it can be hard to determine sometimes like which yeses are genuine and how to make sure that everybody feels like they can say no and they can redirect things and they can say what they need. And then like communicating after a scene and finding out that some of the yeses they were giving were not ones that they felt as deeply about, but they didn't feel as empowered to say no.
Yeah, I'm with all of what you guys are saying. Like communication is the biggest key to having a good experience, especially in kink. You've got to be able to, you know, really say what your boundaries are. And if your boundaries change, you got to be able to communicate that as well. Like I can remember a time when, you know, Sebastian was talking about how we go down a list of things that everybody can do. And, you know, sometimes in the middle of a scene, they change their mind. I think I was that performer once. I had agreed to being completely wrapped in cellophane and then having like a gas mask pulled over my face. And when the gas mask started to come over, I surprised myself and started to freak out a little bit. And so we had to like, you know, 69 the gas mask, and it still went great. We still did a beautiful scene. It was still nominated for something, and you know, we had a great time. But again, communication, it's everything.
Yeah, I'll jump in on that really quick because I agree with what everybody's saying. And really the one thing that I have learned throughout my career is that communication is what's most important. You know, I primarily in the BDSM space work as a bottom. And there was definitely this learning curve of learning that I actually can say what I want to say and that I actually can say no to something I don't want to do. And that process took a while to learn and to feel comfortable doing. And one of the things I really try to do now, doing things like talking on panels and things like that, is really try to communicate to empower people who are newer that, yeah, it's fine. You can say no, and it's not gonna ruin the day or ruin the scene. You still can do your work. You still can get your paycheck. You have to communicate and take care of yourself first and foremost.
With that, I've had instances where models refused or were unwilling to want to change things and stop as the director, noticing like physical signs on their body, or just obviously they're in a state of mental distress, but they're not really sure how to communicate it. We have to kind of be the bigger voice for them, tell them this is for your safety. It's not messing anything up. We'll just change things up, give you a break, move on from there. So yeah, really kind of offering that comfort level that like you can adjust anything at any point and no one's ever going to be mad. That's important.
And I like to say that tops can call red too. And just because your sub can keep going doesn't mean you have to.
I'm hearing lots of great stuff about just communication and just observation. And with those learnings from those experiences that you've had, what's something that you kind of like to be mindful when you start, whether that negotiation is on a set, in a dungeon, in a bedroom, what are some things that you kind of make sure that you want to kind of like bring into that kind of initial negotiation, either before a scene or even before getting to the place, you know, before you do a scene? Domino, I see you had your hand up.
I always, sorry, like it's loud. I always try to make sure that my models, like throughout my agency, are as comfortable as possible, and like pretty much whatever they want goes, and like no one should be doing anything that makes them uncomfortable ever in adult industry. Like this, we're in an adult industry. We have to act as adults accordingly to how people's feelings are and how they're going to deal with certain things. What they say goes. So just making sure everyone's accommodated, everyone's very happy and satisfied with the situation that they're in and what they signed up for. You want to make sure that they leave with the best experience ever, not some situation that scars them for life and makes them have anything to hold against the adult industry.
I think for me, a big thing is that I trust someone's yes a lot more after they've told me no, especially if they've told me no to something they think I really want. Because when we're negotiating, like the scariest thing, because I switched, the scariest thing a bottom could say to me is, you can do whatever you want. Because like, no, I can't. I know there's stuff you don't want and don't like. So I need you to tell me what it is, because I am a psychologist, not a psychic. I'm terrible at mind reading. So like, if you tell me I can do whatever I want, then I'm going to shave off one eyebrow and hit you with an octopus. You don't want that? Great. So you don't actually want me to do whatever I want. So like, let's actually talk for real.
Yeah, it really is important to know what everyone's hard no's are, whether they're the top or the bottom, sub or dom. You want to know what their absolute no's are before you go in and make a mistake and, you know, kind of, I mean, obviously we can, you know, recover from it, but you kind of want to avoid any, you know, uncomfortable situations if you can.
Well, just to kind of go through kind of the things we ask on our kink.com checklist, it's basically, what kind of corporal are you into, and like list each of the parts of the body, like your, you know, your breasts, your nipples, your butt, your thighs, inner thighs, and all of that stuff. And just kind of, it's an exhaustive list. And then sexual acts that you're into, like maybe you're okay with rubbing or stuff on the outside, but not penetration. So like, just ask as many things as you can think about.
So a very good friend of mine once approached a negotiation. I was bottoming to him. And we went through what Fivestar was just saying about physical body parts, physical limits. And then he asked me a question that nobody had ever asked me before. And he said, how do you want to feel today while we're playing? And this was a couple of years ago that I had this experience. And ever since then, whenever I am negotiating with somebody, as a top or as a bottom, I like to bring this, how do you want to feel? Because sometimes people want to feel pretty and strong, and sometimes people want to feel gross and degraded, or sometimes people want to feel physical pain, but not emotional pain. There's all these different emotions that I also feel like you can bring to a negotiation. And it's that one simple question has really changed the way I negotiate a scene or an on-camera activity.
Yeah, I totally agree, Casey. And just to go with that, on top of like corporal, we even ask what's the type of verbiage that you like to be used or that you don't like to be used. Because some words in like a scenario can just like trigger somebody, can bring them back to a really painful spot, or it just makes them not feel, like Casey was saying, how they want to feel that day. So that's also very important.
And I'm thinking about, from a trauma perspective, what would it be like to actually negotiate trauma activation in sessions? And I do that I recommend that for clients as well as for sex workers that I work with. How could you talk to producers and directors and other co-stars about, these are the things that will set me off. This is what it looks like when I'm activated. This is what it looks like when I'm shut down. This is what it looks like when, you know, my nervous system is on high alert. And what can you do to help me bring me back so we can keep going? Because a lot of times it's not because harm's actually being done, but it's because there's some kind of reflection of harm from the past. And so the more awareness you have as to like, what does that reflection look like? You can actually hold that space in a really beautiful and effective way for them.
And I know for me and my personal experience of early on in bottoming, one of the questions kind of similar to Casey's experience that someone asked me is like, what does checking in look like to you? I think that was really important because I think we kind of assume that like taking care of somebody is this kind of very clear one size fits all. And that was really important because for some people, they don't want to break a character, they don't want to break a scene, or they want a specific time of like, I want to go up to this point and I want to be checked in on, or you will know to like check in on me like when this happens. For people who are a little bit more aware of kind of what they're going through and what their experience is like. But that was something that I thought was just a really like powerful question of like, oh yeah, what does it look like for me to be taken care of in this vulnerable situation? Another thing that I wanted to talk about, which is I think is a bit more kind of specific to kind of the adult industry and kind of we're in a place where all you need to do in order to make content and monetize that content is basically have a cell phone with an internet connection. And these kind of put in situations where people may not be on a set with, you know, other people who can advocate for themselves. in this initial sort of, what are some things that we can kind of share with people who are kind of entering sex work, whether that is going to be an on camera or not on camera situation? What are some tools that we can kind of like give to people to kind of think about how they can kind of better advocate for themselves or better negotiate for themselves that might not be immediately obvious?
Well, again, I think the key is just that communication, really being able to talk about what you want, what you don't want, what your limitations are. I mean, go overboard with it, especially, I mean, don't think that it is weird or corny or it's going to ruin the experience. It's actually going to ruin the experience if you don't speak. You have to, like, especially with kink, put it all out there and then put it all out there again and keep going until you're totally comfortable with, you know, who you're working with, who you're gonna, you know, interact with, and make sure that this is going to be a good experience for you. I feel like a broken record. It really is all about the communication.
I'm a real big fan of getting references from community members, other performers, other directors you might know. And I like to say this in any consent panel I'm on, like if there's performers out there that might want to work with someone, like say a rigger, but they haven't heard about them, like I might not know them, but like feel free to ask me. I might know somebody that might know them. So I'm just putting that out there.
This is great stuff. This is, again, I'm hearing like, don't be afraid to over communicate, reach out for recommendations, which I think is just an extremely important thing that it's not often immediate for people to think about. And yeah, I think that's also kind of like a kind of a good indicator. Like if you feel that you're over communicating and maybe that other person feels like you're communicating too much, is that a red flag for people? Is that something that, like, what are some of the things that you can kind of, when you're getting feedback, I see a lot of heads nodding, so I'll let somebody kind of jump in. Of like, what are some of the red flags that in terms, you know, maybe for you or maybe that other people might.
So I have an example from recently in my own life, which is I was hooking up with this guy, and the previous night to this conversation, we had been doing stuff that was newer to him. He was going to fist me for the first time. He had never done that. So I was talking him through it. And then the next morning we're chatting and he's like, you know, it's just a really big turnoff to me when you like say what you want during sex. And I was like, what? And he's like, yeah, when you say it, it's just like, it's just a turnoff for me. And I was like, well, that's not a thing I'm going to change. So this is not a good fit for us. During kink, during more extreme activities, during something someone else is new to, during everything, we have to be communicating a lot because no one knows your body better than you do, and your body changes every time. So the thing that worked for you yesterday may not be working today. The like impact that you took easily yesterday, today might be too much. The term that yesterday was hot for you, today might be really gross. So you have to communicate about this stuff all of the time and use your words about it. And you know, I tell folks like always over communicate because it's so much better to have like more information than you need than to not have the information you need.
Can I jump in and say something on the production side of that? I think I might have a reputation for checking in too much as a director, but it feels important for me to do that. You know, on holds, like sometimes we hold to move the camera or to adjust things, adjust the lights or something like that. On holds, I always check in with people, and that's kind of my boundary. It's like, I want to be able to talk to you because, you know, I might be taking you a little bit out of the headspace of subspace, but we're actually making a product here. It's not, I would love to, I want you to have a good time, but it's not the same as you doing a BDSM scene at home with a partner that you trust and that you have a relationship with and that you'll have aftercare with. Like, we're making a movie. So that's just one of my personal boundaries.
Yeah, I'd love to jump in on that, specifically talking about red flags. If someone wants to work with me and they start to communicate things to me, like, I want this to be like a real scene. I want it to be like we're at home and there's no cameras here. I often will take a step back and say like, well, wait, but actually, I don't know you. we've never worked with you before. There is in fact going to be a camera here, which changes our dynamic. And there's, like Fivestar was saying, there's often this conversation about like, you're not going to provide me aftercare because we're just shooting and then I'm going to go home. This was really a thing when Kink was at the Armory, and it was, you fly home tonight. There really is no time for aftercare. It very much changes the kind of conversation you need to have about the scene, whether or not there's a camera that's going to be present or not. And these pre and post factors, they really change things for me.
I feel like anyone who is concerned about like how you feel afterwards, like concerned, like they well, not concerned so much as how you feel, but concerned how they want you to feel afterwards. For those are the people we don't want to be working with. Those are people who shouldn't be booked. That's manipulation. Like it's not good. And no one like that who says anything like that or thinks anything like that should be working with us. And that's why we have these kind of discussions, so we can get rid of those people. It's disgusting how they take advantage of us or advantage of a situation because they think some adult moment is going to be a way for them to get out every single kink they have. And we're not like their fuck doll. We're human beings. We're goddesses and gods. Like, let's be real.
There's some great, oh, go ahead, Angie.
I'm so sorry. I was going to speak to one other kind of like question around, you said the newbies kind of looking for what they might need to know to help negotiate, maybe your second question. One thing that I wanted to add to that conversation is that I think one of the biggest problems I see with sex work clients right now, and in my own experience, is the digital rape experience that's happening right now, that I think folks really don't realize like how much of their content they don't keep, they don't own, and they're not paid for. And so like being able to talk to folks about that, and I don't know, we probably don't have answers in this space, but I hear that as one of the primary conversations we have every day around how do you keep yourself safe? How do you protect your identity, your reputation? I've had lots of clients doxxed by other sex workers, people that get mad at them in the industry that dox them and like send their information to people. And just so much kind of like problems in how to protect, like even if I, make my own content and submit it to places that I'm having some control over, anybody can still steal it, download it, resell it. And it's really hard to get content taken down from other sites. So there's just this constant like sort of, like the sexual assault experience that's happening, consent violation happening in so many places. And I don't know, again, we aren't maybe the place to solve it, but I just want to name that as a factor.
I think that's an excellent point that you bring up, and I think it's something that, like, I know that I have been in situations where communication about distribution of content has been like unclear, and whether that content has been stolen, content that I'm in has been reposted to places that I didn't give my consent to, and and while I don't have any answers, and I wish that I do think I almost feel like that's an entirely its own like panel or like series of discussions, because I think it's really important. I think it's really important as there are more and more platforms that are trying to, be like the next OnlyFans and I think right now, I think there's the potential for really kind of talking about like the security that these platforms like offer to people when their terms of service change. So often the sex workers, we get on a platform, we see that there's potential there, and then all of a sudden, maybe it's Visa or MasterCard that pushes that change, or that platform doesn't want to be associated with anything sex work related that make that change, and we either get booted or our information gets leaked, or that platform becomes a target by people who want to get our information for whatever reasons. But I do think this is definitely, I think, a topic that I think we should come back to. I want to get to some of these questions that have come up from the attendees for the panel. So this is a question from an anonymous question. How do you deal with past events where consent was lacking or broken, and now you carry guilt from would, should, could? Is it possible to overcome this type of situation or make space for it if you broke consent, or if you had consent broken without both situations, without malice/intent?
I blacklist the fuck out of those motherfuckers. If you've ever taken advantage of me or made me feel in a way that I felt like this was not right and this is not what should be going on in the adult industry, like I will blacklist you. I will let all of my girls know that this is how you work and how this goes on, or how you work. Maybe it's like in my mind, that's one thing, and in somebody else's mind, it's another. But like for me, like if you fuck up, I have no problem telling every single trans girl that you're a fuck up and that I'm not gonna work with you. And if that's what their mindset is, they shouldn't work with that person either. And also companies, I let the companies know, like, this is what this person is doing and this is how they're making the girls feel behind the scene. This is something they should take in consideration. Like, those people should not be working, those people should be behind bars.
I think this is a really important question and a really sticky question, because when we zoom out far enough and over a long enough time scale, like everyone is going to violate consent at some point or has in their past, generally at least once in a pretty big way. Because most of us don't learn consent. We're raised in a rape culture that teaches us to violate each other's boundaries, that teaches us to interact with each other with entitlement. And so I think that it's important for us to figure out how to own when we have violated consent and figure out what we can do to be accountable for that and to make amends for that and to like pay attention to that in ourselves. I think that there's a lot of temptation to make this like a black and white, good people, bad people kind of issue. And there are some people who just like choose to violate consent. I think it's important to look at how creating that kind of a dichotomy and dynamic, though, creates this illusion that like some of us are fine and we're not going to violate consent and we're going to be doing the right things all the time. And that's just not true. Like, we're all humans. We all fuck up. You know, several years ago, I got really drunk when I was staying with a lover of mine, and I came home drunk and I don't remember anything that happened. And apparently we had sex and he didn't really want us to. And we had a really long conversation about it the next day to figure out what he needed to feel okay. I felt horribly guilty about it. I feel even worse that I don't even remember what happened. So it's like it's hard to know what happened there, but it led me to reevaluate my relationship to substances and how I use substances, particularly around people that I have sex or kink relationships with. And you know, he was able to talk to me about what didn't work for him. We were able to heal that. We've seen each other since. And like, what I did was not okay. I don't know, like, I don't beat myself up about it on the daily, but I still feel guilt about having done that because I hurt someone I care about. And I think that's another part of this balance is like, how do you accept the guilt for things you have done and not make that your personality, but like allow that to create a foundation for more growth and change.
Well, I think you really, like in life, like with relationships and friends, you really have to take responsibility for your mistakes, learn from them, and apologize whenever possible. Like, apologize profusely whenever possible. It may or may not make a difference, but it's better than ignoring the situation and acting as if you didn't do anything wrong. I think, you know, we should, especially when you're in a situation where, you know, boundaries can be crossed. It's not that hard to do. Just own up to it. You know, talk about it, talk it through, apologize, you know, do what you can to fix it and make it better. So that way, you know, if it's a studio thing or a professional thing, your reputation is not ruined and you don't get blacklisted, you know. Again, communication. That's my main, I just want to tattoo it across my forehead. Communication is everything.
Absolutely. And in some scenes we've had instances where we have discussed what the limits were and what was on the no list today. And people honestly will just forget accidentally. Like, I've had people that said they don't want to be hit in the face, and somebody just kind of goes in and is rubbing their face. All of a sudden I see that hand move and it whacks and we have to stop everything. And but usually it's obviously it was just an accident. People do make mistakes, but we just need to recognize that and try and do better next time and be more acknowledging of that.
I would say too, from like an anti-oppression perspective, like it would be really cool to see more like transformative restorative justice practices in the adult industry. There's a lot of great models in community action and activism spaces where there's ways to move through harm that's been done and ways to do it in an effective way. And I think that the Erica Less situation is maybe a good example of, how things just could have been done way better from minute one to make everyone feel better and have everyone in the industry like feel supported in the process, because yeah, we make mistakes and we need room to learn and grow and heal the community versus ostracization being the result, where everyone's isolated or cut off and moved away from this place of like community and repair and connection. And ultimately the industry has a lot of like negative stigma around patriarchal, oppression that happens around racism and sexism and transphobia and all the things that come with, like, there needs to be a lot of healing done to make the space feel safer for people in it and safer for those consuming it.
Agreed.
So I'm gonna wanna kind of answer some of these questions that keep popping up. There's seems to be a kind of like a theme on and the questions that I'm seeing around kind of boundaries when it comes to negotiation with sex workers online, whether that is in the way that clients of sex workers are talking in DMs, and or how sex worker can be really clear about their rate. In my history and when I worked at the talent department at Kink, we had this often conversation that we would often push back with, like, my rate is my rate is my rate. So, establishing that, like, you set your rate, and people need to respect that rate. Someone specifically is asking, I'm not quite clear it's the same thing, but I check in with porn and cam performers on sites such as OnlyFans when I'm messaging them to make sure that my dirty talk with them isn't making them uncomfortable. Sure, I'm paying them, but I don't feel that it entitles me to transgress their boundaries. If any of you have thoughts on check-ins regarding sexual conversations and messaging, I think this is kind of really, really important, I think, for, the more platforms that we're on and what we're, the limits of those platforms in terms of like what we're able to post in order to advertise the content that we're selling, versus the way that people feel entitled to use certain language towards people. So I'm going to kind of open that up to how people kind of feel about, like, how do we kind of better establish those boundaries as sex workers, and with the clients that we interact with.
As someone who does a lot of online sex work these days, one of my very favorite things is when, just to talk specifically about OnlyFans, because I think that is primarily the platform most people use these days. I sincerely appreciate it when members there check in about dirty talk or about fantasies. I sell BDSM content there, and I really appreciate when they want to make sure that everything was done in a consensual manner. And the reverse, I feel like, is also often true. Sure, there are fans who are like, I gave you $5, so I get to do whatever I want to your body. And that's obviously just not how it works. And I find that the good fans and the ones who have care appreciate if I say, like, hey, by the way, I don't like it when you use that word. You could call me this word instead. Or like, hey, I actually don't feel super comfy dirty talking about that. And I think that it's hard. It's hard to not feel this sort of, well, they paid $5, so they get to do what they want, kind of internalized feeling, and this sort of internalized whorephobia. But I think that you just have to stay strong, feel comfortable with the removal behind the computer screen. That's a big thing for me. It's like, they can't see my face right now. I might be really uncomfortable, but they don't need to know that. I can just clearly communicate. And it's just about having your boundaries and maintaining them. I have a written list. I have a list of things that I can actually send to people and say that I can just copy and paste rather than having to put in that emotional labor every time somebody starts to cross a boundary. And I find that to be really helpful.
I love that, Casey. I also in cam spaces, I set my boundaries really quickly, really early on. Like I don't do race play. I don't do certain kind of like degradation play. Like I give people that like the minute they come into the room, like these are my rules. And so I think there's like some space for like just navigating the ways in which like people will, I'd rather filter them out immediately and not have to deal with some of the like bullshit. But I appreciate when clients ask consent, like, can I call you this? Or can I refer to you as this? Or can I, you know, consent's always great. So the more check-ins, the more like, I mean, I think this is one of the few jobs where we voluntarily agree to be dehumanized. Like I had a guy who wanted to do a scene where he just wanted to call me a stupid bitch for 4 minutes. I'm like, all right, I'm gonna sit back and wait for this to happen. But you know, like that, we're voluntarily like moving towards dehumanization, but we have power in it because we're consenting and we're negotiating it. And so the more ability we have to do that consent negotiation process, the more we maintain our power even when the scene is over.
Kind of an ongoing theme on my sets is that even though we're doing all of this horrible, mean things to the submissive, like at the end of the day, the submissive is the one who's kind of in charge of what the action is going to be. Always checking in with them and what the pacing is going to be, what implements we decide to use. That all needs to be okay with them, and even though they're the ones tied up screaming for help or anything like that.
As someone who's been tied up on your set, I can attest to that. I always feel like I'm in charge as the sub or the bottom. I mean, it looks like the other person is in charge, but I really am. So thank you.
Good. I'm so glad.
I think it's kind of important to acknowledge that, like, you know, oftentimes what we sell is fantasy, right? We're selling, you know, a certain perception, and sometimes the mechanics of getting to selling that fantasy don't always align with what that fantasy is. It's like we have to kind of set certain limits and certain boundaries in order to get to the place where, you know, you can have this session where, you know, humiliation or degradation or whatever the content that someone is wanting to seek out is. So another question that kind of came up of like when a violation of consent is not, I guess this is kind of, I'm trying to find out how to kind of phrase this in terms of like the severity of like a consent violation. Like Angie, for example, you kind of talked about like you were at a play party and you wanted to wrestle with your friend, and that was just kind of part of your learning. Something like that, where it was maybe not something that you need to make sure that your community is aware of, like that this person is unsafe. But you're like, hey, like this is fucked up. This didn't work for me at all. Let's talk about it. What are I think what are some ways that we can kind of I think like either initiate that process, or what does that kind of conversation look like when consent violations aren't to a severity level where safety of other people or safety for yourself in the future isn't as much of a concern?
Yeah, I mean, I can just speak to like being in a lot of kink spaces and communities and facilitating that. I mean, it happens all the time. Every day at parties, there's like someone puts their hand somewhere they don't want it to be, and there's like just slight things. It's not sexual assault, but there's this space where humans are needing more communication and more capacity to feel in connection. So I think part of it is being able to like, is this the person you feel safe in having a conversation with, and can you get back into a relationship that feels good? And often that's just, I want to feel heard, I want to feel understood, I want to be able to work through this thing that happened, and know that like you're gonna be aware of my feelings in the future, and you're gonna consider my experiences in the future. And like, can we have that conversation? Not everyone can do that with us, and then we just want to keep ourselves safe in those situations in the future. And so our own safety is our own priority and has to be our first goal.
And I think, you know, something that someone talked about earlier in terms, I think it was Angie, about like, is the emotional experience I'm having about the harm I'm experiencing here, or is it an echo of past harm? And like being aware that, you know, most of us who are involved in like outside the box sex and relationship stuff have some kind of trauma we've experienced. It's very difficult to be queer in this world and not experience violence due to it. It's difficult to be trans or non-binary and not experience violence because of it. It's difficult to be non-monogamous or kinky and out about any of those things in any way and not experience violence about it. if you're a sex worker, our culture is horrific to sex workers. It's so bad, right? And so a lot of us have trauma that makes or that can influence how strongly we react to things that we experience. And I think that reaction is valid, and it may be like out of pace with what happened. And so I think it's important for everybody involved to take a minute to like be accountable for what you did. And if you're experiencing a reaction, to like evaluate like how much of this is this exact thing happening, how much of this is a dynamic I have with this person in general, how much of this is the space that I'm in, how much of this is other trauma I've experienced, to help you figure out what you need in order to feel better from that experience, in order to move forward from it, in order to experience healing or accountability. Because sometimes if we're having a really strong reaction that's about more than just what happened, it can be difficult to know what accountability looks like until we understand all those factors.
I just want to say that was so good. Everything they said was amazing. Yes, I agree with all that.
Thank you all so much for just sharing just the wonderful immense amount of knowledge and just being like fully present and being here for this. And I really appreciate that. I'm not ending anything or going to anything. I want to like just acknowledge that now. I feel like oftentimes we wait to the end to like thank people for, you know, sharing their expertise and their knowledge and their learning, but I just want to do that right now before so that we don't have to kind of, you know, box that up in a wrap up. I wanted to I know we talked about what were some of the red flags, and I thought this was another good question that somebody asked. What are the green flags? What are, like, when people are doing something right and you're like, yes, this person like gets me, this person sees me, this person is like down, I'm down for this. Like, what are some of those things, whether they're, you know, personal or kind of general things that people that you know, what are those things that are really green flags?
My favorite thing, specifically in a professional space, is when the other person initiates communication. Even if it's just a simple like, I want to talk about do's and don'ts when we get to set. Just like something like that. I'm like, yes, this is going to be great. We can have a conversation today. I love that.
Fivestar, do you want to go first?
No, you go ahead.
I think for me, related to what Casey just said, like people who are aware of the complex power dynamics that we're interacting with, related to things like gender or race or socioeconomic status, or like who's topping versus bottoming, like people who are aware of that and call specific attention to it, particularly when they're in the position of greater power, makes me feel way safer about negotiating with them. Like, so people who are aware of the power they are holding explicitly acknowledge it, ask if there's anything that I want or need around that power dynamic, make me feel way more comfortable to negotiate.
I was going to talk about body language like during a scene. That are kind of cues that people might be into it. Like during a spanking scene or a flogging scene, when you're hitting someone's ass, like if they start wagging their tail at you, like I take that as a yes. Also like just facial expressions, and when you could, and just talking during the scene, and just saying like, you like that boy, you like that, you know, that kind of thing. And if they respond affirmatively.
Yeah, big green flags for me are like, especially when we're having people fill out the checklist before a production, people that ask questions already. Like it's because a lot of people, they'll look at something on the checklist, they're not sure what it is, they try and make a guess. Like, I would much rather you come to me and we can fully go through it exhaustively, make sure it's completely what you know it is, whether you want to do it or not. That's another conversation.
It's always a good green flag when someone is actively listening and they're very present in the moment, and you can see their eye contact and they're asking you questions specifically about what you just said, asking you to elaborate on what you just said. That's always a good sign that, you know, things are going to go well.
You can always tell by like who's easier, like I feel like the faster and the easier the booking is with whoever your talent or the producer or whatever is, you know, it's going to be that's somebody that's going to be easier to work with instead of somebody who is like gives you a hard time, or is like anybody who like questions anything you have is most likely not going to be the best scene partner for you. You want someone who's just like, oh yeah, absolutely, love whatever you want, like this is what it's about. That's what you want. You want everything to be, in my experience, that's what you want. That you want everything to be as comfortable as possible so you can make the best content as possible. My best scene is with Sebastian. And in my opinion, my best scenes with Sebastian is because he made everything so easy before we shot together.
Oh, well, you are a sweetheart, Domino.
Don't tell people that.
I was thinking one other green flag is just someone having good body awareness. Like I'm not going to play with somebody or even want to negotiate with somebody if they don't know, like they can't tell when they're in subspace, or they go so deep that they like lose consciousness and can't be aware of their experiences. So like I want someone that knows the minute they're shutting down or the minute that they're getting escalated, or like they can read their own cues and can do something about it. So that's always a good indicator.
I know something that person for me is a green flag is when someone is kind of really clear about I guess I'll use the term kind of like honorifics, like what they want to be called, how they want to be addressed, like, you know, whether that is like, I don't want to be called this, or like you call me sweet baby, and this is like, you know, it's on for me. Like, and I know for me that just kind of communicates a certain amount of like foresight of like, this is what gets me going. This is what, you know, grounds me into like this scene or this character or this space. And yeah, that's something that for me works well. Sorry, I'm just going through some of these questions, and I really need to increase the size of the font on my computer so I can read. So there was a question around kind of negotiating boundaries in terms of rates, and this question is like, I tend to undercharge because of low self-esteem. I'm going to start charging more. How can I renegotiate my rates with my clients? I know there will be pushback, but I'm worth it. Sex work is hard and I should be able to live comfortably. I think this is a really good question. I think considering with all of the people who are kind of maybe doing more online sex work, or maybe their sex work world was not in the online space. How do we do those? Domino, I saw your hand kind of go up. So I'm gonna start with.
Always ask the budget. Like if it's for a major company that, you know, is backed by like MindGig, like the same people that do browsers and stuff, then obviously ask for as much as possible and then work your way down. Leave room for negotiation. But if it's for like a private company or for like a private person's OnlyFans and they're willing to pay you, like keep that in consideration. This is coming out of somebody's wallet and not necessarily out of a huge like a bank that they can just pull out of. But always ask for more. Like you're renting your soul out for a moment. You're not renting like a fucking like car or something else. You're renting your soul out for a long moment in time. So like always ask for more, and never think you're worse or worth less than you are, or like think like I'm new so I need to ask for less. Like that doesn't fucking matter. Like if you can sell the job and you can do the job right, then ask for whatever you want. And then if they can't pay for it, negotiate. But like, don't do anything you're not comfortable getting paid for, because you're gonna regret it in the end.
So I recognize that like often the conversation itself around rates is really tricky. And I'm trying to sit here and conjure up the language that I would use. And what I was actually wondering is if someone would role play as a client with me, and I'll be me, and Dr. Liz is going to do it. So ask me, try to come to buy a custom video from me. You're on my OnlyFans, so you're going to buy a custom video from me.
Hey, Casey, I'd really love a custom from you. What's your rate for a custom?
Well, that depends on what you'd like to see. It can be whatever.
I mean, whatever. I just like, I really love your work and I really want a custom for me.
Great.
So,
Well,
like,
I would.
you know.
I would
just
love
something
to,
like that.
maybe I could masturbate and moan your name.
I mean, yeah, sure. That sounds good. Like, I think that'd be all right. So like, what's the rate for that?
I would love to do that for you. I know that the last time I made a custom for you, I charged $50 a minute, but I'm actually charging $60 a minute now.
Whoa, like what happened?
I've gotten really busy and I'm being a little more particular with the customs that I'm taking. I hope you can appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people love your work. It just like, it's just a lot of money. I don't know. Like, I don't know. Like, I, it's weird that your price changed.
I'm sorry, but my prices are non-negotiable. I can hope that you can appreciate the time it's going to take me to shoot this custom video for you. And it's a my prices are non-negotiable kind of conversation. Thank you, Dr. Liz. I appreciate your help because I couldn't get there by myself. But yeah, it's a you know what? This is my time. My time is valuable. I appreciate you appreciating that. And if you don't appreciate that, then I can offer you these other services that take less time and cost less money.
I like that. Thank you so much, Casey. Thank you, Dr. Liz Powell. I appreciate that role play. That was great. You know, something that came up earlier, you know, and actually, Casey, you kind of mentioned this about kind of your experience of, you know, maybe going to a set, flying in. Domino, you use the term you rent your soul, and like talking about how do you take care of that soul, and like what does aftercare look like in a world where you might not be in like, you know, a personal relationship or a kind of a dungeon play space where the time for aftercare or the people who might be providing aftercare are either maybe not there in person. What does aftercare kind of look in this sort of world where people are making content, and how can people ask for things that kind of stimulate that, or be aware of what their needs are?
Physically or emotionally?
Either.
So I don't deal with people like, I'm gonna jump first. So I don't deal with people person to person usually, because like, ew. But I think emotionally as the worker, emotionally afterwards, you have to remember, like, you have to come back to your main self, like, and I don't know, appreciate what you've done for yourself in that moment, but remember that it is just still yourself. Like, you are a human being that you have to take care of. There are certain things you have to take care of that this sex work and like, and emotionally or physically beating people up isn't going to take care of. Like, you have to take care of that yourself as well. Therapy is always great if you're not getting physically beat up, or I don't know, because I don't deal with people physically too much, but like, I know that like finding my sense of like being grounded, like finding a way to always come back to reality and reminding myself that I'm not just Domino Presley, I am Jasmine Balenciaga as well. And like, I can live that life. And like, that life is just as fulfilling as this other life. It's just more fun beating the shit out of people emotionally and physically. And getting paid for it.
Yeah, it all comes back to self-care. When I started working in sex work, I started as a fetish model, and I had an amazing mentor. And the very, very, very first thing he taught me was you have to learn how to provide aftercare for yourself. They're not going to do it for you. And I know that that's sometimes really hard to hear for people who are in the kink community looking to do it more professionally. And that's sort of a shocker, because aftercare is such a pillar of the kink community. But professionally, it just kind of doesn't happen. And you have to learn how to take care of yourself. You have to learn the things that make you feel good and make you feel cared for. I eat chocolate covered pretzels after really hard scenes, and that like resets my brain, and that's just my thing.
Yeah.
Mine's a good fat burrito, Casey. But yeah, even on our sets, we do try to give as much aftercare as we can within the time that we have people. But like, for instance, like they might have marks or something. I can give you arnica to put on it, but it's still going to be, you need to be the one to put it on yourself. I can give it to you, but I need you to go home and actually, you need to do the self-care. So yeah, it does come down to self-care is very important.
I mean, when on set, even if you just say, you know, do you need a glass of water? How you doing? Would you like a snack? Or do you need a break? Like that, like is often enough for me. So it's great, but I also agree that you have to do some stuff for yourself. Like I'm the kind of person that recharges on my own anyway, so I'm used to going off by myself and fixing things up. But for me, one of my physical triggers is I'll take out my contacts and put my glasses back on. And that's like me returning to myself. And then I can leave the set, get in my car, listen to music. And usually it's food as well. Food is another one of my things. I have to have a good meal and then I can be okay. Every once in a while, you know, I might go have dinner with a friend instead of having dinner alone. But most of the time, just putting the glasses on and eating something really rich and heavy and fattening will do the trick. But you got to do something and you got to figure out what that something is for you.
I want to say to all of the people who are newer, who are listening, that this thing that you do for yourself, it's not going to come overnight. It's not going to be something that you innately know. It may very well be a process of trial and error, trying to figure out what works for you and what the best things are for you. And there is nothing wrong with you if this process takes you some time. It literally took me years.
And I'm just going to make a plug. It's really good to have a therapist if you can in your corner. And Pineapple Support's good for that. But I'm working on a certification for therapists to learn how to treat sex workers. So I have a group of 50 therapists and sex workers working together on this program, and we're going to train a bunch more therapists to do a better job. So hopefully there'll be a lot more options for all of you in the future, and a lot more just people that get your experience, and you can come and just be your whole self. That's what I hear constantly from clients, is I'm the only place they've ever had where they get to just like say whatever they want to say and be all the parts of them. And we really need that space because yeah, you're not going to have your performer maybe talk about something weird they said or did with you. Like they may not have the space or capacity. And so you need someone else to be able to say like, you're not bad or broken, you're doing great, you're still beautiful and empowered and strong, even though this shit's hard. You know, like you need those reflective spaces that can constantly help us shore up our own sense of self that the world is not going to give us because of all the stigma and bullshit around sex work.
Therapy is key.
Unfortunately, it looks like we're coming to the end of the hour for this time. This is a 1 hour panel, correct?
I was just about to
Correct.
come in and say, and on that Domino's note, thank you all so very much for being so open and educational for our viewers. It's really events like this that people get to know a bit more in depth and reduces the shyness about it. You know, if they understand and appreciate what other people are going through, then they can open up and become a bit more like empowered in themselves. So honestly, from the bottom of my heart and all of our listeners and watchers, please, thank you ever so much for your time and appreciate you spending it for the last hour with us. On behalf of everyone for Pineapple Support, I'm also going to say thank you to our sponsors, Kink.com, obviously, current crew, thank you. Also, loyal fans, Shiny Bound, Feet for Cash, and Clips for Sale. And if you do appreciate events like this and want us to see a bit more, then please head over to pineapplesupport.org and hit that donate button so we can provide as many mental health resources as we possibly can to adult industry performers. For once and last of all, thank you and good night, everyone. Hope you have a great time. All the best. Cheerio. Bye.